What up, gang? Carolina Jackpot time coming at you on Sunday afternoon. Let's get into yesterday's game and go through this real quick. I want to talk about some big winners and some big losers from yesterday and give you my overall reaction to the state of college football as it sits through week number 6. I know it sounds cliche to say that everybody says this, but I really have a hard time believing that we're fixing to go into week 7 of college football. And it seems like yesterday it was the summer. I don't know. Does time fly faster as you get older? I think it actually does. Minnesota went on the road to number 1 Ohio State yesterday evening, 42-3. This game was never close, never in doubt. Ohio State just crushes Minnesota there. Good-looking game from Julian Sayin, and their wide receiver there, Carnell Tate, with almost 200 yards worth of receiving last night. So big win there for Ohio State. They keep on rolling. Miami goes on the road against Florida State in ACC play. They come out 28-22. Game was not that close. It was 28-3. I think going into the fourth quarter, Florida State kind of comes from behind a little bit to make it interesting. And actually, they were an onside kick away from having a possession at the end where they could potentially won the game. Thomas Castellanos throws a couple of touchdowns for Florida State, also throws a couple of picks, and Miami did score off both those picks. Carson Beck was pretty effective last night, and Miami gets it done in the big rivalry game there against Florida State. Oklahoma rolls all over Kent State, 44-0. This game was, it was never in doubt. I think that you would actually would have made money at FanDuel if you had bet Kent State over. I think it was 2.5 points. So the odd makers knew Oklahoma had a really suffocating defense, and Kent State's offense against power competition was just anemic and non-existent, which it was. Michael Hawkins, the backup quarterback there, doing a pretty good job for Oklahoma and leads into the win. They go in the Red River game against Texas, who we'll talk about in just a minute, this coming Saturday at 3:30 Eastern. Mississippi State goes on the road to Texas A&M. The number 6 Aggies, now these rankings were as of yesterday. They've been updated since, so ignore that. Really, I shouldn't even say those rankings, to be honest with you. They're a moot point. 31-9, Texas A&M gets the win over Mississippi State there at Kyle Field. This game was close going into, at halftime she was close. It was 7-3 and 14-3 going into the third quarter. Mississippi State just not able to really get anything going last night offensively against Texas A&M, and they did what they had to do there to get the win. A lot of people, myself included, were on Mississippi State against the spread in this one. I think we just read a little bit too much into their performance against Tennessee the week before and kind of got caught in a little bit of a trap there. Here's the big one. Penn State goes on the road to UCLA and loses. 42-37 was the final score, and that game wasn't that close. This thing was 27-7 at halftime. It was 34-21 after 3 quarters. UCLA just went absolutely buck wild. And one individual, Nico, responsible for 5 touchdowns yesterday for UCLA, 3 on the ground. He rushed for, 128 yards, 3 touchdowns, threw for 166 yards, threw for 2 touchdowns there. And he has that game that I was telling you about, guys. This earlier in the season, I had said something in one of the games. I don't remember if it was the Utah game or if it was perhaps the New Mexico game the week after that they actually ended up losing, that I was just waiting on this guy to just freaking go off. Just to freaking, grow up and be like, hey, I'm here, I've done this, it's me, I need to lead this team, and I need to go out here and show everybody what I'm capable of doing. And it finally happened yesterday. Just a huge win there for UCLA against Penn State. And they're gonna finish with a horrible record this year, and who knows who will end up taking that head coaching job. But I think that was, I like Penn State and everything. But you gotta feel good for UCLA, battling against adversity there, and they get a big win. Now, I wanted to say this. I know that after the summer we had that debate and all that stuff, I kind of agreed to bury the hatchet with one Sports Talk Jay. But I got to ask this. Every week he does that Nico versus Joey Aguilar comparison, and every week Joey Aguilar destroys him in the metrics and yada, yada, yada. Is he going to do one this time? Because Nico had a win over a team that's in the top 10, and Joey don't. They couldn't do it. They had a chance to do it against Georgia, but they couldn't do it. Yeah, so we'll see. Now, who's going to finish with the better numbers at the end of the year? Most likely Joey, but for one day, Nico actually has his moment in the sun. Texas goes on the road to Florida. 29-21 loss by the then number 9 ranked Longhorns. Just a terrible, terrible performance offensively. Couldn't get anything going. I remember last year Texas actually had a really strong run game. That's all but disappeared. That Arch Manning is not, and actually in the second half of the game yesterday, he actually played better than what he's been playing. But this guy has looked awful this year, if we're just going to be honest with ourselves. Texas may need to turn to a backup quarterback here and see if they can get something going, because the schedule doesn't lighten up at all. They play Oklahoma this coming week. Oklahoma's a better team than Florida. I dare say Oklahoma's a better team than Florida, even with John Mateer being out. Florida was circling the drain, and they seem to do this all the time. It's the past several years they've been doing this. Florida's ready. They're ready to can Billy Napier. They're ready to get rid of him and move on from him. And all of a sudden, somehow or another, they pull out some kind of win over a highly ranked team, which I don't think Texas was that good to begin with. I haven't thought that all year. That they don't scare me at all. In fact, I'd be more than happy for that. I would have been more than happy yesterday for the Gamecocks to line up and play them. I think they would have beat them. Just extremely a paper tiger that's living on going to the playoffs the past couple of years, and name recognition and their roster. That's what they're living off of. Steve's not any good. They're not any good offensively. They're just a mess. And Florida also not any good either, in my opinion. But obviously better than Texas yesterday. Gets a 29-21 win in the swamp. Whee! Vanderbilt goes on the road to Alabama, 30-14. Alabama wins this game. Got to give credit to Vanderbilt. It was a struggle. The game was 23-14 late into the game. Vanderbilt had the ball with a chance to pull within 2 with potential for an onside kick and another possession. We know that Alabama's not good at defending that onside kick. At least they wasn't last year. We know that. They could have potentially given Vanderbilt the ball back again there with a chance to win it. In fact, there were points in that game in the second half when people thought Vandy was going to win the ball game, but they don't. Alabama goes up 23-14, and then Jam Miller runs it in from, I think, 22 yards out in the closing seconds there to really piss off the bettors. And, well, he made Carolina Jackpot happy because I did have Alabama covering the spread. But this was a good game. It was fun to watch. And, as I suspected, Vanderbilt just doesn't have the depth to keep up with a team like Bama. They threw everything but the kitchen sink at them, and they still just couldn't get it done. I was told in the comment section or in a live stream the other day that I did with Rob, I think that by someone, that Vanderbilt has plenty of depth. Well, they may have plenty of depth, but it's not quality depth. It's not the kind of quality of depth that a team like an Alabama would have on their second team. So, good show there by Vanderbilt. And this team could win 8. 8 might be a little short. So maybe win 9 or 10 games. possibly. The remaining schedule, they've got games against LSU and Auburn. I mean, both those games are at home. I believe they do travel to Kentucky. Of course, they travel to Neyland Stadium to take on Tennessee. So we'll see how things pan out for Vanderbilt there. But I'll be pulling for them the rest of the way. There are a lot of teams that they face off against on this last half of their schedule that I don't particularly like. So, they go to Texas too. So that's going to be interesting. Texas Tech rolls over Houston. Houston looked good coming off the bus, didn't they? They looked good coming off the bus in the old school Houston. I don't know if anybody saw that game last night. They had on Houston Cougar jerseys with they were the old school slate blue and red Houston Oilers jerseys. They look really good. In fact, I wouldn't mind seeing them adopt that as their colors all the time. I thought it looked really, really cool. They hit hard, as the young kids would say. 35-11, though, Texas Tech all over Houston last night. This team's legitimate. Georgia, 35-14 over Kentucky. This is about what I expected. It's about what I expected from this game. I will say the Kentucky quarterback, Cutter Bole, looked a lot better yesterday against Georgia than he did against South Carolina. And one might say, well, Georgia's defense better than South Carolina's. I don't know. I don't know if they may be better across the board, but I don't know that Georgia's defense is better at creating havoc than what South Carolina's was. Plus, that game was his first road start. This was his second, so, of course, he had coachable moments from last week that could take into this week. But Kentucky was never really in this ball game. They did score late to make it look somewhat respectable. It was 35-7. Gunnar Stockton played pretty well in this game, scored a couple of touchdowns on the ground running. So Georgia goes on ahead. They found another running back for themselves too. There in the young man. Chauncey Bowens rushed for 70 yards yesterday against Kentucky. Of course, he went for over 100 last week against Alabama. So Georgia looking pretty strong here as we go into this last half of the season, sitting here with a 4-1 record. Cincinnati gets out to a big lead yesterday against Iowa State at home and then holds on for a 38-30 victory over the Cyclones. Cincinnati was not ranked going into this game. Iowa State was. They take them down. Cincinnati now sits here with a record of 5-1. And the poll came out today. Believe it or not, they're still not ranked. So Cincinnati's still not getting a lot of respect there from the AP folks. I don't really understand that one. But, it's like with anything else. They're the kind of team, they just have to keep winning their games. Just keep winning their games. Maybe let that fuel you a little bit. Wisconsin goes on the road to Michigan. Michigan wins, 24-10. Not a real impressive victory over Wisconsin, but I figured this to be how this would go. Just kind of an ugly, muddied up game. There are not a lot of offense, especially on the Wisconsin side. Notre Dame does cover the spread. They take care of business against Boise State, 28-7 win there. Notre Dame's defense comes up with a kind of a suffocating effort against the Boise State Broncos, and the defense had been Notre Dame's issue up until yesterday. Does this mean they fixed their issues, or was Boise State just, kind of overmatched by Notre Dame? I think it's probably a lot of that. But Notre Dame, the last 2 weeks, has only allowed 13 points against Arkansas and then 7 against Boise State. So it could be that they are starting to turn a corner there. It wouldn't make sense that a team coached by Marcus Freeman would be so poor defensively all year long. Illinois takes care of business against Purdue, 43-27. They scored 27 points in the second quarter against Purdue. Illinois looking pretty strong. They had the really, really bad performance where they just got boat raced a couple of weeks ago by Illinois. But outside of that, they beat USC last week, and then they go on the road yesterday and beat Purdue, which doesn't sound impressive, but Purdue is much improved over what they were last year. The record is not really showing it. They're a 1-5 team, 2-4 team, but Illinois still gets a good victory there. That's a pick Carolina jackpot got wrong. That's one of my personal bets that I make. I had picked Purdue to cover the spread early in the week, and that didn't happen. The spread was 8.5, so they would have needed another touchdown and maybe a 2-point conversion too. Virginia goes on the road to Louisville, and in their second overtime game in 8 days, because they played last Friday night, Virginia gets a 30-27 win on the road at Louisville. That's impressive. Louisville is a tough team at home. Louisville was an undefeated team up until now, but behind quarterback Chandler Morris and a really good rushing attack, Virginia just keeps on winning here. They've got to be. People keep saying Mississippi State, but I don't know. I think Mississippi State's going to fall off just based on virtue of the schedule that they play against. Virginia may be the biggest surprise and most improved team in the country this year. They just keep on winning ball games here, and they do it again. Boston College drops their game to Pitt. Pitt 48-7 over BC. Just annihilated the BC Eagles here. It's a team that has had a game early in the season. I think it was week 2. They went to overtime with Michigan State. And if I'm not mistaken, they pulled out they lost a close game there to Michigan State. Went on the road, though, to Stanford the next week. They lost to Stanford, who is just an awful team. And then here we see Pitt just flex their muscles. Pitt was beating Louisville last week by 17 points at one time, and then Louisville came back in that game. So it looks like Pitt left a no-doubter this week against Boston College. We saw Clemson go on the road to North Carolina. Of course, Clemson gets the 38-10 win over the Tar Heels. This game was 35-3 at halftime. If I'm a Tater man or a Tater fan, I'm a little bit concerned about the lack of points put on the board in the second half and just kind of a let's just coast home type attitude in the second half of this ball game. Of course, North Carolina did step it up a little bit in the second half, but Clemson by far the more talented team here. I thought that Dabo was going to put a 60-burger on them. He used to have no problem doing that back in the day. I mean, he even did it last year against Appalachian State. So, not really sure. Not to say this is a good win for Clemson. They needed a win to get up off the schneid, and they did it. One other thing I would not have done was that trick play to start the game where they threw the ball out to Antonio Williams, and then he threw the touchdown pass. Because, if you're Dabo and you've been coaching this long, you knew you were going to win that game. You knew how bad North Carolina was. I really don't think that there was a reason to start the game with that, because you have now you got to take it out of your arsenal, because you've got it on film now and other teams have seen you do it, in which, you could have potentially done this in a spot maybe later on in the season, a team that you're going to be down against. You're going to be trailing at some point in the game, like, Florida State or my Gamecocks, definitely the Gamecocks, that you're going to be losing to. You might want to do it then to kind of reestablish some kind of momentum. Not a team like North Carolina. But we're splitting hairs here. Doesn't matter. Baylor 35-34 over a terrible Kansas State team. They don't cover the spread there. Didn't watch them in this game. Couldn't tell you nothing about it. Navy 34-31 over Air Force. Air Force covers the number here against Navy. A valiant effort from the Air Force Academy, just not quite enough as Navy gets the win at home. The midshipmen just keep on rolling. They're undefeated still, quietly undefeated. This is a team that I looked at in the summer and I thought could potentially, with what they had coming back, potentially be a group of 5 team that make the college football playoff. It could still happen, but we saw kind of last year with Army and that how they faltered down the stretch when they started playing the tough competition. When does Navy play Notre Dame? Because I know they do. Speaking of the military academy, Army on the road at UAB gets a 31-13 win. they get it done there, covering the spread and looking pretty good against UAB. I watched Army against East Carolina last week on Thursday night, and man, Army had they were throwing the ball around more than I've ever really seen them throw the ball around. They had 2 to 3, probably at least 3, I would say, touchdown passes, just absolute wide open touchdown passes with nothing but green grass in front of them that they just flat out dropped. Just could not haul in. So I knew if they were able to just clean up that little bit, they would be able to possibly start turning the tide on their season a little bit. And they do that yesterday in a major way. Wake Forest at Virginia Tech, 30-23. Wake Forest wins over Tech. This was a really disappointing effort here from the Virginia Tech Hokies in the mind of Carolina Jackpot. I had them for the first time in 2 years yesterday, and I've participated in it every single week without fail. I finally won a spot, or I won on Uncle Lou's rigged wheel that he does in the morning show. And, I wanted to just do Clemson against the spread as my pick, because you get to pick a game against the spread, and Uncle Lou will send you twice your money back when you win, or if your game wins. Well, I just say, I don't know. I want to do something here just a little bit different and go against the grain. I'm going to take Virginia Tech to cover against Wake Forest, and that bit me in the ass. It really pissed me off. They played well last week on the road at NC State and got a big victory, and I figured they would be able to beat Wake Forest coming back home. They had I think it was their homecoming, they had what they call an orange effect game. They wore totally orange uniforms. Everything in the stadium was orange. The fans all wore orange. They even had the VT on the side of their helmets instead of the traditional white or maroon that they normally would wear was orange. So a metallic orange. I'm like, my God, y'all, this is a gimmick. You're like Tennessee. When Tennessee wears their gimmick stuff, it helps them sometimes. Not so much yesterday. Not so much for the Hokies. They went on ahead and lost. There. If anybody cares, this game that was in the Rob and Kale shows, Pick'em, Kale Hall Shitter game, was Western Michigan at UMass, and Western Michigan does win that game 21-3 against UMass. Wow, UMass is terrible. They're winless on the season, and I was going to pick them, put them in the Kale Hall Shitter game again this week, but they've been in the shitter twice this week or twice this year already. Didn't really want to do them again, so I went with Northern Illinois and Eastern Michigan for the shitter game that's coming up week. So there's a little spoiler alert for tonight's show. Oklahoma State goes on the road to Arizona, 41-13. Just absolutely gutless, punchless effort by Oklahoma State. They're not even trying anymore. They've had some players hit the portal there though too, so they kind of have an excuse. At Virginia Tech, you really didn't see, I think one kid hit the portal, but everybody else pretty much stayed together. And as they did at UCLA too, which kind of surprised me. You would think a team like UCLA, out west, liberal attitude, do what we want to do, all those kids would have transferred out. They actually didn't. Surprising. And you saw them get a big win yesterday. Washington goes on the road to Maryland, 24-20 win. They scored 21 points, it looks like, in the fourth quarter here. It looked like Maryland was ahead in this ball game 20-3 going into the fourth quarter, and Washington scores 21 unanswered to win it 24-20. Wow, what a collapse there by Maryland. Oregon State and App State. App State wins 27-23 against the Beeve in Boone, North Carolina. This is another one that I have another football contest that I'm in with my son, and we have 3 games that we make each week that are key picks, and this one was actually on that pick'em, and we labeled this as one of our key picks. I just figured Oregon State would have a tough time with the travel across country, and then getting into Boone, North Carolina it's not an easy place to get to, even after you land at a major airport, which I'm assuming they would have to fly into like Charlotte or maybe Asheville. I don't know. But App State actually holds on there and gets the win against Oregon State. Oregon State was trying to come back in the second half, and they had the ball. They had a goal line stand. The App State actually was able to to hold on and win that ball game there. So big win there for the Mountaineers. And Coach Dowell Loggins, 31-18 SMU, victorious over Syracuse with no Steve Angeli at quarterback. It looks like this one was pretty non-competitive. And then Syracuse scored 15 points in the fourth quarter to kind of make this look a little closer than what it really was and maybe cover the spread there in that matchup. A lot of filler games here that I just don't really want to go over. Nebraska, 38-27. They don't cover the spread, but they do beat Michigan State at home. Nebraska is now sitting here at 4-1. They take on Maryland this coming week in a road matchup of 4-1 teams there. I like Nebraska in that game. I think they're better, more battle-tested. Old Dominion, 47-7 win over Coastal Carolina. I have to dive in the highlights there and see what's going on there. But Old Dominion is now 4-1. They're playing some pretty good football right now. This is a team that could potentially compete for the Sun Belt Championship. Coastal Carolina has really, really fell off the past few years. Ever since they lost Jamie Chadwell, it just seems like they've been getting worse and worse every year. 31-17, UNLV wins over Wyoming. UNLV stays undefeated in a game that the field was covered with snow. I don't see if any of y'all saw that last night, but that's the first sighting of Schneer that we've seen here in the 2025 college football season. So good stuff there. UNLV goes on ahead and decides they'll go on ahead and stay undefeated and win that ball game. TCU 35-21 over Colorado. Scores 14 straight points to end the game there for TCU, but it was a little bit of a battle against Coach Prime's team. There would have been a home matchup for TCU. So Prime and company come on the road and actually do pretty well there to stay within the number against TCU. Oh, no, they don't stay within the number. Anyway, they kept it close for a lot longer than they should have. Kansas on the road at UCF. Kansas gets the 27-20 win on the road against UCF, bouncing back after losing at home to Cincinnati last week. Kansas is now sitting here at 3-2 on the season. Tulsa loses to Memphis 45-7. Memphis is now ranked. Yeah, Memphis is ranked as of now. Duke with a big 45-21 win in the late night bailout blowout special against Cal. A lot of us had Cal winning that game on the money line. Thought Duke was going to struggle with the cross country trip to Cal after winning a game last week against Syracuse, which they were up in Syracuse, flew back to Durham, then flew all the way across the country to Cal. But Duke is for real, 45-21. You know, they'd like to have that game against Tulane back. They lost on the road at Tulane a few weeks ago. They'd like to have that one back. I think Duke, if they played now, Duke would probably win that matchup. But as it were, they're sitting here at 4-2 and in good shape in ACC play. They're 3-0 in ACC play right now is Duke. So sitting kind of in the driver's seat there. This is a team that they're quietly sitting over here, and it could be a team that could potentially win this conference or at least make a appearance in their conference championship game. Now, they got games down the road against the Taters. I know they've got a game down the road against Georgia Tech. I've told you guys, I think Georgia Tech, I think they're a good team. I don't think they're as good as they've been ranked. I don't think they're quite as good as they've been getting credit for. This could be a spot here where Georgia Tech goes on ahead and loses against Duke. But we'll have to see what happens with that one. It'll be an interesting matchup when it happens. But that was the week that was yesterday in college football. Of course, we'll be talking all about next week's matchups tonight on the Rob and Kel Show, which will be live tonight at 9 o'clock. Here on the Carolina Jackpot channel. We've got a lot of stuff going on here in week number 7. You've got kind of a light slate. We've actually got some weeknight games that are, not Thursday night games. You start having the MACtion in around November, but we always will start seeing some Conference USA games pop up on like Wednesday and Thursday night. We've got a couple of Wednesday night games this week. I mean, none of them are great games. Liberty, UTEP, Missouri State, Middle Tennessee. But for the degenerates like me that, want to see college football like every damn day of the week, there you go. Thursday night, I got some good matchups. East Carolina goes on the road to Tulane. That's going to be an interesting matchup there for kind of the top spot in the American Athletic Conference. You got South Florida at North Texas on Friday night. That one could have implications in American Athletic as well. Rutgers, late night game against Washington on the road. I'll be watching that one from the hotel room as I'm traveling to LSU for that big game, the Gamecocks and the Bayou Bengals. Looking forward to that one. Saturday, we've got Ohio State at Illinois. Alabama's at Missouri. That's the noon game. That's going to be a good game. Tickets for that game are $180. They're starting out at right now. Spoiler alert, just saying this right now, throwing this out there. I think Alabama loses that game. I think Mizzou's going to get them. Alabama, this is sandwiched between a tight game that they kind of had to fight for their life against and come out the winner against Vandy, and then they've got the game against Tennessee that comes up after this one. This is a bad spot for Alabama to be in on the road against a team that has a beast like Ahmad Hardy at running back. I think they can win that game. What else here is interesting next week? UCF's at Cincinnati. Can they keep on rolling? Maybe. Indiana is at Oregon at 3:30 on the CBS game. That's going to be a huge matchup. That is going to be huge. That is going to be big. Got the Red River game between Oklahoma and Texas. That game's kind of lost some of its luster to me. Texas just sucks. So we'll see though. Watch them beat Oklahoma. Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech should roll. North Carolina, NC State's at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame should drill them. Of course, I talked about Nebraska's at Maryland. Wake Forest goes across country to take on Oregon State. Ugh, man, what a trip. TCU and Kansas State. Arkansas at Tennessee at 4:15. That's on the SEC Network before. The Gamecocks game against LSU is at 7:45 on the SEC Network. That game is on at 4:15. Got Florida at Texas A&M at 7 o'clock. Can Florida do it again? Can they get another win? Probably not. Iowa at Wisconsin. I mean, you have to be a serious football degenerate to want to watch that game. You have to be. That's going to be some real old man wet fart football. Kansas on the road at Texas Tech. Are they going to keep on rolling? Georgia on the road at Auburn. Could be a tough matchup for Georgia. I like them in that matchup, though. Tickets for that game start at $237. Jesus. Michigan at USC. Tickets for that game starting at $200? Really? I thought nobody went to USC games. Maybe they do. Clemson's at Boston College. Clemson will roll in that game. Oh, Boston College is awful. Of course, the Gamecocks are at LSU. Got BYU's at Arizona. That could be a sneaky good game. Arizona State's at Utah. That one could be a sneaky good game. Tickets for that game are $101. So that's about what we got on the week number 7 slate. Anyway, guys, I will see you all later on. Appreciate you very much. Thanks for watching. Peace. I'm out of here. Go Gamecocks. Woo!